Hey Procraftinators! Today I have 3 cards to share with you from Tonic Craft Kit number 27. That's right, I'm sharing a video from this kit pretty much right after I got it. Are you shocked and amazed? Well, I am. I thought this kit was perfect for a fun circle card. I started this card by doing some ink blending off screen. For the frame of the card, I used 2 layers of Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock, and the top layer is the Champagne Classic card included in the kit. The bottom layer is a solid piece, and the next 2 layers are frames. I wanted those vine pieces to be fairly sturdy, as they're going to hang off the card base. I started by ink blending Distress inks in Picked Raspberry, Wilted Violet, Dusty Concord, Seedless Preserves, and just a tiny bit of black soot around the edges on the bottom layer. Then on the top frame, I ink blended Brushed Corduroy over most of the piece and a small amount of gathered twigs along the edges. Then I adhered all 3 layers together and sprayed them with a DIY mica mist that I made with Perfect Pearls in the color Perfect Pearl, which you saw me do on screen. Next, I took another layer of the frame type dies and cut it out of black cardstock and layered it on top of the card front. I also cut the scene type die out of the olive green classic card included in the kit and glued it on as well. I had ink blended some Forest Moss Distress ink on this piece off camera prior to gluing it on. Next, I took my Nuvo Aqua Shimmer pen in Midas Touch, covered the fairies that I cut out of black cardstock, and I set them aside to dry. For some reason, I have issues with my gold Nuvo Aqua Shimmer pen clogging. Only the gold one, so I have to squeeze it off to the side of my mat. I squeezed a little too hard and I ended up with a puddle. So I decided, instead of letting it go to waste, I would splatter some of it on the front of this card for even more shine. It's a little hard to capture on camera, but you can definitely see the little gold splatters in person. Next, I popped my fairies up on foam tape, which was kind of a pain in the rear since they have such small little delicate areas. I finished off the card front by stamping the sentiment "Have a Magical Day," which was included in the kit. I should have stamped this before I added dimension though, but I didn't think of it. I had to stand up and CPR stamp to get this stamped clearly. But I did get it on there. I always seem to forget about sentiments, especially when adding dimension, and I find myself in this predicament. I attached the card front to the circular card base. I made the circular card base by using the large circle die included in the kit. I placed a small part of the cutting edge off the folded edge of the square card base that I made out of Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock that I cut at 5.5 inches by 11 and then folded it in half. Lastly, as an afterthought, I did decide to stamp the mushroom image on the inside of the card in Dusty Concord archival ink. This card is super sparkly. I wish the camera did it justice. For the second card, I started by die cutting some flowers and vines from the dies from the kit. I am using some Recollections glitter paint in olive and red that I got on clearance a little while back. I decided to use watercolor paper when I die cut these pieces, as the paint seemed awfully thin to me and I didn't want my die cuts to warp so bad that they were unusable. Again, the camera just doesn't do these pieces justice. They turned out so much more sparkly than they look on camera. Definitely not as sparkly as mica mist or something like that, but still a fun glitter sparkle that just doesn't show up well on camera. I just kind of dabbed it on with a paintbrush. The bottle says to use a flat brush for best results. I'm not sure where my flat brush was at that moment, but I couldn't find it, so I used what I could find, and it seemed to work just fine. I only showed one of each color since I didn't figure you wanted to see something so repetitive and not so crucial to the card. Next, I die cut what I like to call the scene frame. I left the negative pieces in and stuck post-it note tape to the back so they wouldn't move on me. I did this to make it easier to color since some of the pieces are rather delicate. I super sped this up as I'm not really doing anything fancy here at all. I just wanted to lay down a few different colors instead of everything being all the same color. I am using Master's Touch alcohol markers from Hobby Lobby. After all of my pieces were dry and ready to be assembled, I took a frame that I cut out of the pink chiffon mirror card using one of the frame dies, both included in the kit, and I popped it up on foam tape. I probably should have glued it down flat, as there are some very skinny areas along the sides and the top and the bottom that I didn't apply foam tape to due to how skinny they were, and now they are kind of sagging a bit. Anyways, I applied that frame to a light gray square card base that I had on hand from who knows where. Then I adhered my scene frame die cut in the middle, which was a little tricky since I had to shimmy it down in the middle of that popped up frame. Another reason why I probably should have glued it down flat, but I was able to get that scene frame in there. Now, here is where I made another mistake about not thinking about my dimension and how I applied things. I should have applied my vines before I popped up my frame. Like I said in the last card, I always get myself in these predicaments by not thinking things through thoroughly. I solved my problem by using a stack of Post-it notes to support my frame while adhering the vines. The flowers were fully supported by the foam tape underneath, so that wasn't a big deal. But when I was trying to adhere the vines, the frame kept trying to collapse. I did use a ball stylus and foam pad to give my flowers dimension. I love doing this to the flowers. It makes them look so much better. I also applied my fairies to the card. I applied the sitting fairy to make her look like she was sitting on the mushroom, and the flying one on the edge of the frame, again using the Post-it notes to assist. Both fairies were cut out of the gleaming lilac pearlescent card included in the kit. Next came the sentiment, and again, I should have thought that through. This time I decided to use an acrylic block instead of my stamp platform. I held my breath the entire time while stamping that sentiment, because if it didn't stamp right, there would have been some naughty words said, which is why I do voiceovers and not talk during my videos. My mouth cannot be trusted, and I am terrible at having to double stamp with an acrylic block and almost always ruin my stamping. By the way, I stamped the sentiment in Stampin' Up's Orchid Opulence ink. You also probably noticed that I stamped it out a few times on the Post-it notes. I noticed the stamp was not inking up real well the first time, probably because it was a new stamp and I didn't want to risk it not stamping well. So I kept stamping it on the Post-it notes until I got a good impression. My third and final card was somewhat inspired by a friend of mine, Renee at Delaney Jane Cards. She recently did a messy watercoloring card on her channel. If you haven't checked her out, you really should. I will link her channel in the description box below. I had commented on her watercolor card that I really hadn't done a card like that, and every time that I see someone do one, I think, I should do that. So here I am, doing a watercolor wash type background with my pearlescent Sakura Koi watercolors. I just felt with the fairy theme that everything had to be sparkly or pearlescent. Of course! I found my flat brush, by the way, and used it to apply some greens, blues, and purples from the palette. I did 2 layers and I dried after each one with my heat gun, although I cut that out of the video. Once I was happy, I carefully removed the tape after it was completely dry and cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4. I also cut some fairies in the scene frame again out of black cardstock. I layered these up several times, I think 3 or 4 times, so I had some nice dimension, and adhered them to my card, this time placing the sitting fairy as if she was sitting on the bottom of the frame. After adhering the fairies, I realized I forgot to make them sparkle, so I fixed that right up by applying my Nuvo Aqua Shimmer Pen in glitter gloss liberally all over them. Next, I stamped my sentiment in black soot archival ink. It didn't stamp perfectly the first time. I should have stamped it out a couple times first. So yes, bad words were probably said. So I had to put my big head in the camera and hold my breath to try to line it up right over the first stamping. Thankfully, I didn't screw it up. To finish off the card, I applied some Nuvo Drops and Fairy Wings, which were included in the kit. I love how soft and pearlescent this card turned out, and I think the silhouettes are a perfect complement to the background. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, I hope that you're having a wonderful day. If you enjoyed my video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and leave me some love in the comments. I always enjoy hearing from you.